Morning, everyone. This is the February 21st, 2024 meeting of the Dunn County Planning, Resource and Development Committee. You can see from our table that all members of the committee are present. So do I have a motion on the minutes from the February 7th meeting?
So moved.
Moved by a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm sorry, I should have asked for any corrections or additions. None. Okay. Then minutes are approved. Public comments. Tom, you have one written comment. Can you read that, please?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. So we received one public comment through email. This came from Mr. Terry Nichols, Sunday, February 18th at 3:43 p.m. I'll put it up on the screen here. To PR&D Committee, February 21st, 2024, public comments. After watching the last PR&D Committee meeting and the discussion relating to ADUs and the Tainer Lake area, to me it is apparent that public health and safety should be the highest priority. I first witnessed the housing density of the Tainer Lake area years ago when following CenturyLink's fiber broadband project installation supported by federal dollars. What exists and where the county should go in the future should be based on science, not political, nor trying to appease the landowner. There is a term, public trust, that I believe citizens should know about if they aren't aware of the term already. Public trust is usually in a government setting, protecting all residents in a government entity. Dunn County has just completed a countywide water testing project and spent dollars to do so. Where the dollars came from is not as important as the commitment of Dunn County to prioritize groundwater in this county. Dunn County has a minimum acreage of 1 acre. Would science support the minimum acreage of 1 acre today? Would today's science support what is existing in the Tainer Lake area now? I took a quick trip to the Wisconsin's Health Department online last week and found the department's organization chart. I do this to see how an organization, any organization, functions. The chart is pages and pages, folks. Processes are important. For example, how many county departments are involved in a person buying land in Dunn County? How many permits does the landowner need from the county? At what point do other players come into the picture? DNR, state, federal. I would suggest that there are state residents that are currently using bottled water in the rural areas near the county I was born in. In the La Crosse area, PFAS, the forever chemicals, have forced residents to use 5-gallon jugs of water. Maybe the county has a flow chart already. Are there potential water problems in the future in townships that don't have county zoning? What responsibilities does the county have? What responsibilities does the county have related to townships not having county zoning? The recent completed groundwater report by Dunn County suggests that the county has some problems. Who are the immediate players in a high nitrate area in Dunn County? I would think the county health department for one, due to public health and safety. By addressing ADUs, the county has already seen the interests of the residents. Future decision-making should include the science of today, public trust, and public health and safety. Sincerely, Terry Nichols, Town of Colfax. That concludes our public comments.
Thank you. Is anyone? Barbara? Okay, and here in the back. Go ahead. Come on. Yeah. Yeah, you need to turn down so people at home can hear you. And then name and address.
Am I on?
You're on.
Alrighty. Catherine Stahl at N7607 1010 Street, Elk Mound, Wisconsin. You know, I had the opportunity your last meeting to hear your I thought it was a good conversation about the ADU issues, and I appreciate you taking that so seriously. You know, there are so many things involved with this, and it's a complicated issue as you have spent months talking about. But one of the things I was concerned about when I listened to that conversation, I heard very little, and maybe I'm echoing Terry a bit, but I heard very little about the implications for groundwater for high density areas. And, I would love to hear more of, and I guess I'll just quote Terry, the science behind being able to put detached ADU in a high density area. And it may be that this has been considered. I've looked at the, changes that are on your in your packet this time. And I know that you're trying to grapple with a serious issue, but I didn't hear much discussion about that during your last meeting. And I think it's very serious. I've been in a meetings with most of you, not quite all of you here on this table, about the importance of dealing with density and dealing with septic. And I know many places, particularly in urban areas, are going to multiple housing in R1, and that is in the housing issue is indeed a crisis. I'm very sympathetic to what's going on here, and that makes a lot of sense to me in a municipal area where they have municipal septic and they have water. There are many areas in Dunn County where that's not the case. We're talking about septic upon septic upon septic, and what are the ramifications for that? And I would have loved to heard more discussion about that. At this point, I would really encourage you not to consider detached ADUs in R1 because of the concern about that. I seriously, I really want to support your serious discussion about the housing crisis. It is indeed a crisis, but we also have to think just as equally about what's happening with our groundwater. You've made a tremendous commitment to try to study it, but we also need to be thinking about, what are the ramifications for the future for our groundwater. And I didn't hear that equally discussed at the last meeting, and I hope that is the case. The other thing I'm concerned about, it seems like and we know that there are probably going to be issues about this because not all of us, I'm at the age where, people are trying to talk about ADUs. And I know that my daughter, if I end up in an ADU with you, that it will not end up being an ADU in the future. And I think that's a huge concern about, what's going to happen in the future and what are the ramifications for zoning about that. It leaves a big carry for the zoning department. So I'd really like for you to hear as serious a discussion about what happens with high density, septics with a detached ADU. Thanks.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I just didn't understand your second concern about what happens to the ADU in the future. Can you phrase it in a different way? Because I just didn't understand.
My concern is once, I'll just use myself as an example. Once I'm gone, that, if I'm in an ADU with with my daughter, what is going to happen with that? It's going to either be in a guest room, which is all right, or it's going to be rented out. And, what are the ramifications for that in a high density area? I'm talking about, in a high density area. There are many places in our county, in our zoning, where a detached ADU may work out just fine. I'm just asking you to consider this particular thing. And part of it is perception. I have a lot of faith in our county government. I have a lot of faith in our agencies. I've worked with them. I have tremendous respect. And I know they will work very hard to make sure good decisions are made. But I think we also need, at this point of where you're making decisions about the ADU, that you anticipate and have equal conversation about what the impact is in high density areas and what the implications are for the future. I could go into some things where I think that legislation was made with absolutely wonderful intent, but they didn't consider all of the possible ramifications for the future. And I think this is one of them.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand now. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Hey, I'm Elena Marshall, 2440 3rd Street East, Menominee. And I'm here to speak in favor of the ADU, but maybe not the policy quite as it is. I have a daughter who lives out in Seattle, and she says that the code out there in the city of Seattle is that you are allowed to have one attached ADU and one detached ADU. And so all the new construction there has these three sort of different dwellings on one piece of land. And that would be a very high density sort of area, I've got to say. But but I almost am thinking about it from a very different perspective. I live in the city of Menominee on 5 acres, and I live in a house that has a well and septic grandfathered in. But if I was to put in an ADU, I would want to have it connected to city sewer. I mean, it would have to be connected to city sewer. And the 300 yards from my house is not the closest connection to city sewer. The closest connection to city sewer is actually at the far end of the property. And so I guess I'm wondering why that 300 feet was put in there, and if there could be some way of having maybe not a one size fits all policy. Also, I have 5 acres and 2 children and a mother-in-law, and again, the policy of 1 ADU per unit was a little bit confusing to me as well. I certainly understand that you don't want to have like, a quarter-acre lot with like a lot of little teeny tiny things on it, but on 5 acres, there's room for these things, and they can be hooked up to city septic. So I would encourage the committee to think more broadly about how this might look different in different areas. They did a really lovely article on this on NPR this week. So the city of Minneapolis is one of the forefront cities in our area in terms of ADU use. And over a 5-year period, they added 12% to their housing stock. And of the cities that were in the study, their rent rates went up the least. So I think that there's a lot of potential opportunity here for us to make this a, make housing an option for more people more affordably, while also maintaining health standards and water quality and all that. So just want to ask that you think flexibly about these things. Thank you very much.
Supervisor Kinnear has a question.
Yes.
Thank you for coming in and talking.
Yeah.
I have a question. Are you referring strictly to like your situation in the city or sewered lots, or are you talking about the county in general? Because this ordinance isn't going to affect you in the city.
Um, I did not know that the ordinance did not affect people in the city. So thank you. Does it only affect people who are on septic?
This is, and you can add, but it's county zoning, so it's only the zoned townships. And it doesn't affect the villages or cities. Is that correct?
Right, so any incorporated municipality, so city, village, or town that has their own zoning, or, well, not a town, but cities and villages that are incorporated would not be affected by this at all. So this is really tailored toward rural areas mostly that are under county zoning. So there are towns within the county that this would apply to. And it's not just for the non-Seward, it would include Seward as well.
I think then my comments stand even if it doesn't apply to me personally.
Yep.
Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Anyone else? So I'd note that.
Did you want me to go now since they're addressing it, or should I?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it now. I think while you're going up there, name, address, what we have typically done is when we get to the point of the agenda where we have the discussion about the actual ordinance, the committee has been open to having some comments, additional comments from the. You want to talk now or after? Okay, so understanding that, then, anyway, okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Darwin Anderson, N7886 555th Street in Menominee, Wisconsin. And some of you may know me because I'm on the Tainter Plan Commission, but I'm not speaking for the Plan Commission. We have not discussed, the ordinance, but I'm here to address the additional dwelling units, particularly in the R1 area. So from my personal observations, and we plan to address this at our next Plan Commission meeting, but our current land division ordinance requires 1 acre per unit. So for example, if we had a 6 acre multiplex, we would require 6 acres, and that is to protect groundwater as you know, you've heard this morning, so I'm not going to go into that and reiterate it. But, you know, there are a number of concerns with groundwater. Us aging individuals like me, we tend to be on more medications, possibly even more chemos. And do those chemos necessarily break down as they go down through the aquifer and start getting filtered? You know, good question. We want to be drinking each other's. The nitrates already show that the levels are there from the septics. Couple things I wanted to note, is this going to be our last opportunity, since we're on the plan commission, are going to address this? Is this going to be our last opportunity to really provide a public comment before this goes out of committee, or you know, we'll find that out later, I suppose, as the discussion evolves. And the other concern that we have is what's going to prevent somebody from simply pulling a mobile home in on a on a lot, and parking it there and renting it out. But I think, as I addressed earlier, since that we require 1 acre, if you put an accessory dwelling unit on anything less than 2 acres, R1 and Tainer, you're putting us in a non-conforming situation. So that's just what I had to mention. So.
Okay, thank you. And just to note that there will, depending on our action today, we have a public hearing scheduled for 2 weeks from now. So that'll be at least one more opportunity for comment. You want to speak now, or do you want to wait till I'm behind you? Yeah, okay. All right. We'll make sure everybody gets a chance to say if they're important, likes to be said. Okay. We have no public hearing. Staff reports, Register of Deeds monthly report. Any comments, Heather?
Good morning. Yeah, I really don't have any comments, I guess, unless there's questions.
Any questions, Michael?
Just a personal comment. I know Kathy Stahl said that she had a great respect for the people that work in the county, and I had a personal experience of working with the Register of Deeds yesterday, and they are amazing. So I just thought I would mention that. Very helpful and friendly.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
Do you know what, excuse me, do you know what the status of the bill is about, in the legislature about fees?
No, everything is moving pretty rapidly. I was just trying to follow in the Wheeler this morning to see where we were at with the transfer fee split. Not exactly sure, but I'll make sure I get you an update on that. And also the recording fee increase that they were talking about for the land information funding. I haven't seen that. The transfer fee, I did see that on the Senate calendar. But yeah, everything's changing pretty rapidly right now. So I'm not exactly sure where that's at.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Survey Division.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Business as usual. You can see some of the numbers from the last month. I included the brochure from our land surveying conference that we attend every year. There was a lot of good sessions. Again, you know, it's a good conference when you're struggling because there's 2 or 3 sessions at the same time and you want to go to all 3 of them. So it was very good. Typically it's very cold the last week in January, and surveyors work outside, so it's a nice change of pace for those 3 days. But this year it was 40 degrees, and I think everyone there was wishing they were back at their office working, making some money. But it was, nonetheless, it was still a very good conference. We learned a lot, always do every year, and just want to thank the committee for, you know, budgeting money for us to go to that. It's money well spent, in my opinion. So I don't have anything to add unless there's any questions.
Any questions? Okay, thanks, Tom. And anything you want to add?
So as you can see, this one is shorter than I normally do, mostly because we've been really busy with our ADUs. We're also revising the shoreline zoning ordinance right now and trying to get our comp plan work a little more kicked off. I just wanted to add that we also met with the town of Rock Creek at a special meeting to present some information for county zoning. So the town of Rock Creek is not under county zoning and they are exploring the option. So they wanted to have a meeting where, I came and just kind of answered some basic zoning questions, explained what being under county zoning would look like. I also brought Tammy Traxler from our staff, and she was able to answer a lot of questions about CAFOs and what that would look like under county zoning. And it was a good meeting. It was long, but I think it was helpful.
Any questions?
Do you have any idea what precipitated their interest in zoning?
I believe it's the livestock and large operation CAFOs that are bringing them toward that.
Okay.
Question,
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what happened at, excuse me, at the Board of Review, Board of Adjustment, excuse me, last night? Wasn't there one last night?
Nope. So Board of Adjustment met last Monday, and it was a morning meeting.
And that's the two parcels in out by Napton?
I guess the last meeting we had a variance, or sorry. Yeah, it was a variance application for O'Galley Saloon to change their roadway setback.
I thought I read one where there was a primary ag or whatever, that there is two, I thought it was supposed to be last night. Maybe I got the date wrong, but.
So the next meeting, we'll be looking at two non-farm parcel requests.
Okay,
That'll be our, I believe, March. I can't remember the date, but I can let you know.
no, that's okay. I was just, for some reason, I thought it was on Monday, but. Thank you. And the other thing, I've noticed a couple places that had a quap drill, a quap dash something. Could you explain that, what that was?
I don't understand the question.
Or Tom?
Yeah, I think you're referring to Coop Cog.
Yeah,
I believe it was in Heather's report. I know it was in mine.
yeah.
There was a Coop Cog, so it's continuity of operations, continuity of government. The county conducted a countywide drill, a mock scenario of a situation, and all department heads were involved. We did a run through, that was back in January. Don't remember the exact date, but it was more or less a training for a potential catastrophic event that might affect the county. So.
And just see how every department would react to
Yeah,
that.
try and work out the bugs. We all have a plan. We've all had plans in place for years, and every year we're tasked to update those plans. But we were presented with a mock scenario, a burst water line in this building, and how would that look for operations? Not only, the first few hours, but extending days or weeks out. Providing services to the residents, notifying all the department heads of the emergency, and then conducting public business going forward while that happened. So, yeah, it was a drill. Think of it as a tornado drill, only much more involved.
Thank you.
If I could just jump back in.
Sure.
I am so sorry. So I just wanted to correct this. So my report is covering January, which is why I did not describe the February 19th meeting. But yes, we did have a meeting on Monday with BOA, which would be in my next report generally, but I can fill you in on that if you wanted to hear about it. Sure. No, I'm just off by a month because each of these are reflecting the past month. So typically I'd put this in the next report, but so the Board of Adjustment met on Monday. There were two requests from the same property owners, the Richard and Jacqueline Casper Revocable Trust. Their intent was to create two lots to have non-farm residential parcels. So one already had a home and everything on it, but they were just reducing the size so that they could sell it as a non-farm residential parcel. And the other was containing some old outbuildings, but no home yet. But they also wanted to sell that as a, potential residence. So they went through the process with the Board of Adjustment and both were approved.
Chase,
Yeah, my report is in the packet for land and water conservation. I guess there's any particular questions, I'd be happy to answer. Just a couple things to point out. We are pursuing a summer intern again through the Conservation Alliance. Also exploring some grant funds through Landmark Conservancy to help support that intern long-term. Certainly there's a diminishing return eventually at some point where funds will run out and the intern program may cease to exist through the Alliance. So just looking at ways to extend that funding longer term into the future. And we'll wait to see on that. But the program has certainly benefited our office over the years and other departments, particularly last year with our water monitoring program. And we'll have a little bit different makeup this year since we don't have such a big, intense program. But that program is very valuable, and I think continuing to support it in any way that we can is important going forward. The other couple things is just a reminder that there's a couple big conferences coming up. The Wisconsin Land and Water Conference is coming up the end of next week, or excuse me, 2 weeks. And I will need to miss this next meeting due to being present at that conference. And then if you haven't registered already, I encourage you to do so for the Red Cedar Conference on March 14th. So that's a pretty good one this year. But other than that, I'd be happy to answer other questions I might have included in my report. So, I will see you tonight too, County Board, for reporting on the water program.
Okay. Any questions?
May I?
Yeah.
I had somebody reach out with questions about the county's involvement in a PFAS discharge that the Wisconsin DNR is investigating. I don't know if I want to say the name of the business, but the property is about a half mile north of here, immediately adjacent to Monoman Park, large industrial property. Apparently there was a PFAS discharge in 2019 and they filed a report with the Wisconsin DNR and they followed up. Is the county involved in that at all?
To my knowledge, as far as our department is, we are not involved. I'm aware of it. I do get, I certainly didn't get it in 2019 as I wasn't here, but any other spills that happen in the county, I do get a notification on it. And then just it's a matter of what authority we have to react to it. In this particular case, I'm not aware of, at least from our department, that we're involved, but I can't speak for the county in general. So
yeah, they were pretty concerned because reading the report, you're aware of this, but just for everybody else on the committee, reading the report, the PFAS levels in the groundwater underneath the property were much higher than the recommended levels. And there was concern, since it is so close to Monoman Park, that maybe things should be tested there as well. But that was the concern that was raised to me.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I certainly could follow up with particularly Monoman Park and any source water that's provided there. Certainly there's concerns for the lake as well. And I would say that there is a speaker at the Red Cedar Conference that's going to talk about PFAS and surface water and food webs and stuff. So not necessarily directly related to resolving this, but certainly things to raise level of concern.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman, is this scheduled release?
No,
No,
I don't think, was it?
I didn't.
Maybe
I haven't
Chase knows.
seen
I don't
anything
think so.
about
It
this.
seemed like it was fire related, flame retardant, and I don't know if it was a fire situation or.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thanks, Chase. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, staff. As usual. On to 6C, planning and zoning, the review of the text amendment and discussion of the accessory dwelling units. And you provided us with some revisions and considerations.
Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen here so we can look right at it. All right, so this that's being displayed on the screen right now is information that was sent out in the packet. I included a reference table just to be used as a quick reference to kind of what some of these restrictions are. I changed some numbers here. So we have no more than 600 feet for a junior ADU and 1,200 for a regular ADU. We can get in that. I can go over just some just some summary of some of these standards, because we have gone through these before. So we had a table here with just kind of explaining the intent behind the standard and in really plain language what that standard means. Scrolling down. So this is actually just the Chapter 13 zoning ordinance with the changes in blue. Right now it's we're proposing a permitted principal use of accessory dwelling units attached specifically in the R1 zoning district. We're also proposing changing this language here that says single family housing to single family dwelling, just for consistency's sake. Moving along, we also have a permitted accessory use for junior accessory dwelling units. And also in residential 2. So residential 2 essentially references back to those uses found in R1. So we're just adding accessory dwelling unit here for a permitted principal use. One of the things I wanted to explain here too is the choice between putting them as a principal use versus an accessory use. So when we have a variance request come in, say someone wants to build their home and they're finding they don't have enough room to meet a setback or something to that effect. They want to build closer to the side yard, for instance. We could look at, or let's do it with the front yard. So if we have a principal dwelling, a home, and they want to build closer to the front yard setback than normal, we have a provision in the zoning ordinance that allows for setback averaging. So we can look at their neighbors and the pattern of development in the area and say, look, all these other houses are built closer to the road. Let's average that number out. And that's how close we can allow them to build their home without going through a variance process. Just to keep things flexible for people. Now, if we put a detached accessory dwelling unit as a principal structure, we would also be able to look at them the same way. So they would be treated that way. So the intent of putting it as an accessory is to separate it from the home. So there's no setback averaging. It's considered an accessory use. It's not necessarily by right, but it is an option. There's a lot more rights that come along with permitted principal structures when it comes to variances or things to that effect. So that's the choice there. I'm just going to scroll back up so you can see it, or at least so I can see it. I have attached accessory dwelling unit right now as a principal use. The reasoning behind this is that if it's attached to the principal home, it's considered part of that home. It's got to follow all the same rules as a home. And also, to be clear, there are some ways to build what is essentially an attached ADU under the current zoning ordinance, and this just makes it clear that that is what this is. And now the standards that we're proposing can apply to that, rather than it just being kind of up in the air and open to interpretation. I also wanted to just point out that I think we're still discussing what these maximum sizes are for the accessory dwelling units. I'm hoping that we can narrow that down today. I've suggested 600 for the junior ADU and 1,200, I believe, for the regular ADU. With that, I think I'll stop talking and open it up to the committee.
Could we start by going through your reference table and asking if people have any questions or understand the intentions there?
May I, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Yeah, I've got a little confused because I'm confused between attached and ADU, attached and unattached. The third one down, type of ADU, and it says ADU. Does that mean attached or unattached?
Correct. So I would think of it this way: is the ADU is the umbrella. Underneath, you have different types of ADU. So you have junior, attached. The other definitions, we could scroll down and take a look at those. But all of these are ADUs, but a junior ADU doesn't necessarily have the same definition as a regular ADU. It's limited. So they
Right,
get
I get
smaller
that
as they
part.
kind of come
I'm
underneath.
just talking about how you've got them listed. So
Yes.
that I understand it.
Yep.
Because
So-
it says on the second one down attached. Okay, so you specified it was attached. And then all of a sudden it said ADU and I assumed it meant both, but it's very difficult to make sure that's the case. So when you say just ADU, you talk about the general umbrella, it's everything.
Yes.
Okay.
So you're saying that the attached, or any other comments from Gary? Questions? Gary?
Yes, please. Could there ever be a possibility where somebody came in and built a attached ADU and they want to make it into a twin home? All, it'd be different owners in each one? Is that a possibility? I don't think it is, but just ask that question.
Nope. So just so everyone's kind of on board here, a twin home is essentially a duplex, but the division between the ownership is split. So a different owner can own both sides. Usually there's a 0 lot line in between. So one owner for one side of the property, one for the other. You can build a twin home in any zoning district almost right now. There is nothing that's saying that you can't. So if someone came to me and said, I have a residential 1 property, I have 2 of them next door to each other, I'm gonna build a twin home across that property line, 1 acre, 1 acre, they're able to do that right now. So if they did, to answer your question, want to turn the ADU into a twin home, there would be a process. There would be a land division that would be required and some other things, but yes, they could do that. That is covered by that standard. I'm just going down. So the ADU can't be sold separately from the main house unless the property is split or legally subdivided. It also can't become a condo. So condos and twin homes are different. So we're kind of saying, no, you can't have a condo, but if you legally subdivided the property, you could have a twin home.
And just one more question. In the town of Colfax, we have a 4 acre minimum for lot. So if somebody had a house and they wanted a relative, whatever, to come in there, they'd almost have to have a separate 4 acre. So does it really, ADU detached really affect the town of Colfax? Because we have very, very few R1. It's almost all GA, general ag. Because they would have to, that second home, no matter 600 or whatever, the town might say, well, that's a second home, you're gonna have to have 4 acres.
So your land division ordinance is regulating placement of structures. Am I getting that correct?
Right.
That is shocking to me. I would understand like a new lot needing a 4 acre requirement. However, I guess under county zoning, if someone came to us and this passed and they had that 4 acre lot already and they wanted to build an ADU, under this, they would be able to do that. But if the town has more restrictions, they wouldn't be able to. So we have to follow the more restrictive requirement, which would be the town's.
Thank you.
And so far, I'm just clarifying, trying to understand. Now, you mentioned principal use and accessory use. Now, there's permitted principal use, right? And there's permitted accessory use. Is there a variance accessory use? When you're explaining a little bit about variance and stuff, if it's a permitted accessory use, that means it's permitted by right, doesn't it?
Permitted accessory use under county zoning requires a zoning permit, just like any other accessory use.
What? Well, anything requires a zoning
An
permit.
accessory, to just be clear, an accessory use isn't permitted by right. Principal uses can be. Regardless, they require a zoning permit either way. Does that
Okay,
make
so-
sense? Does that
well,
answer?
Zoning permit just confuses it. Yeah, everything needs a zoning permit, basically. So, for example, here 13, you have in the residential R2, permitted principal uses, and then it lists them. Now, those are by right, is that correct?
Yep, that's what that essentially means. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you don't have written in here what the permitted accessory uses are, but they're there somewhere, right, in the ordinance?
Yeah, we could look at them if you want me to bring them up.
Well, maybe you'll need to, but not right now. Permitted accessory use, let's just say there was one of them. Let's pretend there's only one. And does that mean if it's a permitted accessory use, someone can do it? It by right? Like,
So I think we're getting stuck on the permitted by right as if that's different than a permit. Permitted by right essentially means that if it's a principal use and it's in here, that is a by right. You still need a permit to do it, but it has more weight to it as far as variances go and other legal options. Accessory uses, they're accessory. You have to have a principal use first. So
Okay.
that's not a by right essentially, if that makes sense.
so if I have a house and then I look down there and there's an accessory use that's permitted, all I need is a zoning permit.
Yes.
Okay, so from my point of view, you're really into this, so you've got all the big picture, but from my point of view, if I have some original use and I go down here and I look at the accessory list and it's a permitted accessory list, I'm assuming if I can get a zoning permit, I can do it.
That's essentially what the zoning permit
Yeah,
is
right,
for,
right,
is
okay,
confirming that, yep.
okay. So I noticed, I might be confused, but there's a discrepancy between principal and accessory as far as the language in the two different things. And it's not something that I'm saying is, I disagree with. It's just that, in one spot, it says something about accessory, and the other spot it refers to principal.
Could you tell me the line number
Yeah,
for these?
I'm trying to think of that, where it was here now. Let me look here. Oh, computer needs to be restarted. No, I know it, and it says 15 minutes.
Just go up and click 8 hours at the top.
Show me. Oh, okay, great. She's got it. Thank you.
I'm not here. Good job.
Uh-oh. There's something else coming up, Diane.
Just click escape. Or left on your keyboard. I know. So proud of me.
Mhm.
While he's doing that, just so I'm going to go back to the very first, and it's not really confusion. I just want to make sure I clarify your first reference table chart where you talk about R1s, and so much of the discussion has been about
Tom, can,
R1.
where are you?
Back on the
He's
beginning,
This.
the reference tools.
Okay, all right.
Could you just make sure, so I make sure clear, what you're proposing in this draft is that we allow two types of ADUs in R1. One would be a detached ADU of no more than 600 square feet. And the other would be an attached ADU of no more than 1,200 square feet. Correct about that?
You are correct. So just to make it even more clear, so the first line here is saying junior ADU, so that can be detached or attached, and that is just an ADU that is less than 600 square feet is considered a junior ADU. So this would be a small detached, less than 600 square foot dwelling or attached. And then if you look at the next line, it's principal use attached ADU. So that would allow for the ADU to be larger, but it would have to be attached. Because of how we have the definitions written for attached ADU, this would still be considered a single family dwelling. They would have to have shared walls. There would have to be some, there's not a firewall. There's not two separate entrances like a duplex. It's still a single family home. I hope I didn't just.
No, that's fine. And how do you address the septic and sanitary provisions in that.
So I think what we've tried to do is keep everything consistent with how a regular home would be treated. So if you were to add an attached ADU, whether it's junior or regular, no matter how large it is, the septic system would need to be sized appropriately for the number of bedrooms in the entire dwelling. So if that junior ADU added one more bedroom, the septic system would need to be adequate to accommodate that. That's up to the property owner and their plumber and how they want to meet those regulations, but they'll need to meet them just like any other house.
So they can meet up either having an adequately sized septic at present, or if they had space and wanted to add an additional septic, but it would be following the same code essentially.
Yep.
Okay.
Just to follow up on Tom's question. So a detached ADU is not permitted in R1?
Yes.
Is that what I'm saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
Unless it's
It's under
under
six.
600 square feet
Yeah. yeah,
or,
I
you know,
got-
smaller than the original
I
dwelling.
got that.
Yep.
Okay, I think I found the other one. In this chart right here, it says R2. I'm looking for the one right up there. It says accessory use.
Mhm.
I think it's listed as principal in the text.
Thank you for finding that. So yes, this is inconsistent. So either one or the other would
Okay.
need to be changed. For R2, the reason for putting it as a principal use, this can be a separate structure. You know,
Yeah,
it's R2 allows for density of 2 dwelling units. So in my mind, having 2 houses would not be any different than having a duplex, other than they're not attached.
Yeah, I'm
to
not
each other.
questioning whether it should be accessory or the other. It's just that I was confused because it's two different things, you know, in
Yep,
two
I'm
spots.
just following up with the
Okay.
reasoning behind this
Oh,
and
okay. So
trying to help.
yeah. Okay, so it'd probably be principal in both?
That's what I'm actually suggesting. So that's why I was saying that for clarity.
Okay. And on that same chart, on R3 and GA, there's no reference to the junior ADU stuff that I could find.
Would
Is
you-
that just me or?
Could you use a reference for the line number? It's a little bit easier to find them if you have that. Can you see it on your
In
screen?
the chart, in the table? I'm
Okay,
sorry,
in the chart,
in the table.
you're looking at what? I was still trying to fix
Yeah,
the
yeah, I-
error
I got
while you
you.
were talking, so.
It wasn't an error. It was just,
was an
there's
error.
a lot of stuff going on. On R3, for example,
Mhm.
there's no reference anymore to the junior. What does that mean? Is, at least that I could find, R3 and general ag.
So again, an ADU encompasses junior accessory dwelling unit, attached accessory dwelling units, and detached. So it could be any of those things.
Okay, so the ADU includes that automatically. I forgot that. Okay. It got split out again, general ag and general ag to attached and then ADU, so it's a little confusing. Okay,
So I would like to just say, like, this reference table is not what I'm proposing. This was just a tool designed to make it easier to understand
Right.
what is down here. So thank you for pointing out the inconsistency, because I think that's important that we hide those, but this is not what I'm proposing be adopted into the zoning ordinance. This reference table would not be included in that. It's just these changes in.
This is a helpful discussion guide for us.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think it's really useful, clarifies things. And probably important that we understand it before we move on to
Mhm.
the actual ordinance. Are there any other questions about we
Yeah.
talked about the reference table in particular?
And I think you addressed this when you were answering Tom. I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding. So if I'm building an unattached ADU, regarding the septic standards.
Did you say detached or?
She said unattached.
Yeah, so
Okay, I
detached,
didn't-
Detached,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
2 separate buildings.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. And I'm wondering about my septic standards. It sounds like all of the bedrooms are kind of just looped all together. It's kind of considered a single family dwelling where the septic standards are concerned, or is that just the attached ADU where that rationale applies?
Unfortunately, I do not know the chapter 6 sanitation requirements as well as I do the zoning requirements. But I believe it's if you're sharing a septic system for both dwellings,
Mhm.
it's going to be keeping those bedrooms in mind. It's not changing just because it's detached. So I would think of it like a duplex. If a duplex was sharing a septic system, it's still based on the total number of bedrooms that are being served by
Mhm.
the system. So if you had a detached, you could have a separate septic system installed that would supply just that building. And you could do that with a duplex as well, but as long as these are being adequately served and the system is treating all of the effluent and all of the waste for both dwellings, we're okay with it right now as it's written.
Okay.
So, the 300-foot setback for a junior ADU in R1. That if you can't achieve that, then you can't do a detached ADU in R1.
I would make sure that we're not calling it a setback because
Oh.
a setback usually implies that that's the minimum distance.
So what's the right word then?
So it's the maximum distance.
Separation or whatever.
Separation.
Yeah.
So the intent kind of behind that 300 feet was to keep these in close proximity so that they're possibly using the same infrastructure, they're not changing the feeling of the neighborhood, or they're not taking a very large parcel and building one house on one side and one house on the other side, where a land division would be more appropriate in that situation.
Am I right that it may have an equal impact if someone has a fairly small, fairly limited land available? It would be difficult for them to do a detached ADU in R1 unless because that 300 feet is quite a distance. So it would tend to lead them towards a attached ADU, I'm guessing. There's that. I mean, Mike, you talked about an area in your town that has R1 lots. Are those 1 acre? I guess 1 acre lot you could do that on, but barely, I think.
Well, the 300 is the maximum. I mean, they could have it 50 feet away.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Okay.
Excuse me for confusing everybody. Won't be the last time.
I feel like I'm doing that all the time, so.
Okay. All right.
May I follow up?
Yeah.
But I feel like your reasoning in general still applies. So it's not the 300 thing, but the setbacks, right? The setbacks from the lot lines still do apply. So I think it would be difficult on a very small property to put an attached ADU. That's something that I'm keeping in mind regarding the Tanner Lake concerns. I just don't see people building. There's not enough space to be building these detached ADUs around Tanner Lake on those tiny lots.
Just a follow-up to detached or attached, it doesn't matter for the septic.
Right.
Yeah, because
The septic is adequate.
as long as the septic is adequate according to the state. So that isn't the difference in that, but there might be, if you put the detached in there, that then you're taking up a space to put the septic in.
If they require additional
Yeah,
septic.
if they require extra septic, septic.
Just any other questions? Yes. Just, are there any other things about the lower part of the table that people would like clarified?
There will be here.
As we get on? Okay.
I'm looking at my little notes. I noticed we added last time and this time 2 bedrooms. Does it really matter? I'm thinking of what Diane says, the less restrictions, and if we restricted it, well, I thought we were gonna do 1,000 last time when we agreed, but if we restrict it to a certain amount, what's the difference on 2 or 3 bedrooms?
So I apologize again where I think you just found another inconsistency between my chart and the actual ordinance. I had originally put in the 2-bedroom suggestion, forgot to take that out. So in the actual proposed changes, I'm not proposing a limit to 2 bedrooms. However, if the PRD would like to explore that, they can. I think the last meeting we had, no one had given me a solid number on the maximum square footage. It was talked about and discussed, but there was not a compromise or any direction to me. If that's something you'd like to do today, we can certainly address that. But as I have it written right now, it's 1,200.
Yeah, I thought we'd kind of talked about 1,000, but that's a specific. Did you want to talk about it now?
No, I think we talked about 1,000 too, but we can talk about that today.
Minimum lot area on going down on the chart? I've been talking about wanting 1 acre, so I assume this was kind of something you thought about there. This, I'm having problems here. This is what's proposed, or ADU is proposed to be placed on lots of less than 1 acre. Well, that's true right now, right? This isn't anything new.
Not all lots are less than 1 acre. So in the case that an ADU is proposed to be placed on a lot less than 1 acre, that's what that means.
If I was to build a house on a lot less than 1 acre, grandfathered less than 1 acre, all this still applies. And this, I guess it doesn't address my concern about having 1 acre as a minimum, because it doesn't do anything for that.
So the intent behind this, and again, it can get more restrictive if you want it to be. The reason I put this in here was to give a little bit more authority to the zoning administrator and the zoning office as a permit, as a zoning permit, to require a better look into these lots that are less than 1 acre. So we can say, hey, most cases, it looks like you can fit the septic system, the treatment system, its replacement area, everything like that. They're not required to demonstrate to us that there's an adequate area for replacement area right now. This is new. And again, it says may be required to demonstrate. So this is kind of up to us at this point. We can make this more restrictive if you think so, but I don't know, I'm just going to say this. I don't think that minimum lot sizes are necessarily going to be the key to preventing groundwater contamination. If you require more lot sizes, you'll just have more open area. If your intent is to have more open area, then I think that serves it.
Okay, can I just stop you there? I know your opinion, and I can see it, and I've talked with Diane too. Because, first of all, if someone has a lot, we've gone through this before, people have come in and said, and then I think Tom had to go and look at it or whatever, and we decided that yes, there was enough, even though we had to give a variance. When Michelle, wherever it is, goes out to a place, Michelle doesn't just subjectively choose, yes, I think this is what's going to be. If there is sufficient area for the state, and I don't know if it says replacement or whatever, but she can't say no if it goes according to the state. Now, because the state says it's okay, doesn't mean we should do it. Because we can put an extra septic on a 1/2 or 3/4 acre lot doesn't mean we should do it. The state, I'll give you an example. For the longest time, high capacity wells, remember high capacity wells are wells that bring out a huge amount. For the longest time, the DNR was not allowed to look at high capacity wells around a person that wanted to get a permit. Is that correct? Yeah.
Cumulative impact.
Yeah.
is not-
Okay. Yeah. So I could have a high capacity well request, and the DNR could not look at if there were 50 high capacity wells around me. And it's changed since then, I believe, finally, that they're able to look at that. But that cumulative impact is a nice phrase, I guess. But just because we can do it doesn't mean we should. We have an acre minimum. I think that's what we should say. It's simple. It doesn't require people going out and trying to make subjective things. Well, what we have right here in a minimum lot size is really what you're able to do right now. You can go out and look at it and say, and a person can't put a septic in unless they can show that there's room. I mean, that's a requirement right now. So I understand what you're saying, and I think Diane and I disagree on, I'm putting more weight on groundwater, and I think Diana's putting more weight on necessity for housing.
A crisis, yes,
Okay, so,
addressing the crisis.
so I don't think this does it, and 1 acre is such a cut and dried thing. That's what we do right now. So I'm, minimum lot area should be 1 acre, and I think that's a compromise. I was thinking about 1 acre for every unit, for every house, basically. And just going back to what we require now, it seems like such an easy.
So
basic
you're,
thing to
Mike,
do.
you're suggesting that you not be allowed to put an ADU unit on a lot unless they have an additional acre of land for that?
No, not an additional acre. The lot that they currently want to put the ADU on is 1
At least
acre or
1
more.
acre.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you kind of cleared me up on that. I was actually thinking 2 acres in a way before. But no, just, yeah, I was. And
Yeah.
he explained that to me that, but now just 1 acre. That's what we have now, and it's probably not sufficient in high density areas. But that's something I think we should do there for minimum lot area.
And I didn't want to, I do want you to share your opinion. So you got partway through it, I think. But do you have any other additional comments on that you want to share on the acreage?
I guess I'm not necessarily opposed to a 1 acre minimum. I just think that density would be a better way to address the groundwater concerns. But as Mike pointed out, Supervisor Kinnear pointed out, it is 1 acre right now. We don't have necessarily the density requirements already written into the ordinance. So it would be the easier route, just because it's so cut and dry already. But I would like the committee to decide what this is, because I feel like I've suggested several alternatives for this, and it sounds like you're getting close to a decision. So if we're gonna have that hearing coming up, I think this needs to be decided soon.
Mr. Chairman.
And I'm sorry
Go ahead, Mike.
if I cut you off.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry if I cut you off.
That was it. That was it.
We're done.
Supervisor Kinnear and I have subsequently had a discussion, but I remain opposed to unduly limiting the ability of homeowners to build within a very comprehensive set of what I think are very good standards that Ann and her staff have developed. I remain opposed to adding additional limitation to the homeowner's ability to do that. And you are not going to change my mind on that point. I would consider some additional limitations on size, but I'm pretty clear on this point. And I've been the noisiest advocate, so I'll continue to be noisy.
I personally like what's in H. I feel that's regarding minimum lot size and the septic standards, demonstrating that there's sufficient area in relation to the setbacks, environmentally sensitive areas. I'm repeating this for the folks in the
Yep.
back. I like that. I think that if we are concerned about groundwater, which everybody on this committee is, we are concerned about groundwater. If we're concerned about groundwater, it makes sense to me to address it directly rather than addressing it indirectly through the 1 acre lot size. That's my take.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or observations about the table, the very helpful table and provided? And I'd propose that we go through the draft ordinance and see see how it shakes out.
So I'll just kind of go through this and you can stop me, please stop
Sure.
me whenever
Yep.
you'd like to comment on something. So the first change here is just changing that housing to dwelling, just to clear that up on what that means. Next, as a permitted principal use in the R1 zoning district, we have attached accessory dwelling unit. And then we have pursuant to section, so that just refers back to the standards. Next, we have permitted accessory use in R1 for junior accessory dwelling unit. And then just some clearing up some language here under permitted accessory structures. It's saying accessory structures shall not be designed or used in part or whole for human habitation and unless or any unauthorized accessory use unless properly permitted as an accessory dwelling unit. I think this sentence could be edited to be a little more clear. Due to time, this is just what I have. But I'd like to go over that a little bit better. But essentially, this is just saying you can't have an accessory, accessory structure that's used for human habitation unless they have an ADU permit. So going to residential 2, under permitted principal use, we have an ADU. So that would be junior, regular, attached, detached. Going into general ag as a permitted.
Excuse me, could you stop before we go to ag? Now, up above, on K, it says attached accessory dwelling unit. I think if we're gonna have some language, then we come down here and say accessory dwelling unit, and we have to assume that everybody knows that that means everything. Is there some way we could make it clearer that it's attached or detached? Just instead of, that just makes it so much easier for someone reading it, no?
Don't we have a definition section? Isn't that how we usually do it?
Well, this is the actual ordinance.
Right.
And if I'm reading the ordinance, I want to make it so that I don't have to go back and look at other kinds of things. I want to look at it and say, oh, does that mean attached? No, it's just saying attached or unattached to make it clear, because you do use the word attached above in K.
So I don't think there's any harm in making it more
Okay.
clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
And in R2, aren't there some changes to permitted accessory uses?
I'm sorry, I have to make sure that I'm writing notes so that I
Okay, go-
change
yeah.
this.
Go ahead.
That
Give her
or
a second,
make
give
sure
her a second,
Tracy's
yeah.
getting this.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
I'm just gonna go ahead. So go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, well, the way I write when it's fast, I go back later and I don't even know what I wrote. So, and once again, I'm not trying to change things. I'm trying to understand here. Permitted principal uses, you've got the normal thing, everything in R1 and then 2-family housing, and then accessory dwelling unit pursuant. This is under permitted principal uses. Aren't there any changes in R2 to permitted accessory uses?
So as I have it written, this is putting ADU as a permitted principal use. Because my reasoning for this is that in R2, you're allowed 2 dwelling units. So whether it's treated as a principal or an accessory is,
Okay. Okay, so there aren't any changes to the permitted accessory dwelling units.
correct.
Okay. Okay. And what happened to R3? Shouldn't R3 be in here for?
So R3 is not in here because R3 simply refers to the uses that are permitted within R1 and R2.
Yes, but I guess I'm kind of used to when we get an ordinance that we have the entire ordinance with the new stuff in it.
Right?
Yeah. And
So this
I
would be 120 pages long if we did that.
I think you can do that on,
I will do that at the hearing for sure. But as for like discussion purposes, I felt like it wasn't necessary. But in the future, if you'd like that, I absolutely can.
we have always done that. And I would want to have the entire ordinance there to look at before I have to vote on it. We've done it with the
We're
subdivision
not voting
ordinance.
today.
We've done
Yeah,
it with,
that's a good point. We're not voting
We're
on
not
it
voting
today,
today,
but your
but-
point is that we should have it in front of us.
we
when
should
are-
have it in front of us and not just
I think it's
at a public
appropriate the way
hearing.
you did it, but it's good to point it out.
before we have a public hearing. I want to see the whole ordinance. Because I understand now why there's no change here in the permitted accessory uses in R2. But I want to see the ordinance.
And
So-
just to add to that, and I 100% agree with you, we can do that. The way our Word document for the zoning ordinance is written, if you add one single space or another line, the entire document is destroyed. So for me to even get this written was very, very difficult. I had to hand type this entire thing. I could not copy paste. That's why it's not there. Mostly because the amount of time. I have 5 days approximately to get this stuff to you guys between each meeting. There just simply was not enough time for me to type out the entire ordinance.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, yeah. Ann and I, this is sort of not exactly germane, but Ann and I have attended a couple of meetings with our colleagues to the east and some other meetings. We talk about the way that ordinances are written, and they're like complicated and, incomprehensible and so on. So there are some different ways with graphics and other kinds of things to do an ordinance. We're sort of not there yet, but I get you, this is pretty obtuse. And it's not exactly staff friendly. So I was okay with her suggesting where the changes were and not going back through the whole thing, but I didn't tell you that, so.
This is, and just to tackle on there, I'm so sorry, but this is why I think probably a couple staff reports, I mentioned looking into a program called Encode. That came right from this frustration. And I did reach out to Corporation Counsel. I've had meetings with other department heads and Chris Corpola exploring Encode as an option. I think we're more looking at it when it's time to repeal and replace this zoning ordinance. That would be an excellent tool and an excellent time. Things like what you're pointing out, where it's referring you back to another section, we're not going to do that anymore. It's going to be right there and it's going to be clear for anyone reading it.
Gary, do you have a?
Yes, please, just to help me, clarify, when an ADU is first built, does it have to be a relative of the main structure? Because we talked a lot about, we talked before about the mother-in-law and that kind of stuff. So to build an ADU, it doesn't have to be any family relationship from the principal structure. Is that right?
As this is proposed, no, there's no restrictions toward family members or against renting the property.
Okay, and then on R2, where there could be a duplex, so you still could also add an ADU to it. So then you really got multifamily on whatever lot it was, what size, right?
So we do have a standard, and this is it's in that actual standards section that makes it clear that you can't have an ADU with a 2-family dwelling or a duplex. It can only be in addition to a single family dwelling.
Oh, okay, even though it's R2,
Right.
okay. But now, like Mike was saying, if it be an R3, would that been possible?
So it's, again, it still applies only with a
Okay.
single family dwelling. So R3, you could potentially have, a duplex or a multiplex, but you would not be able to get an ADU as this is written.
Okay, thank you.
One thing that Gary brought up here now, when we first started this, we had an owner occupied standard. And that was the very first one. The second one, it got made smaller to apply to a smaller amount. And then in the third one, it's no longer owner occupied in either the original or the ADU. And I don't think we had a discussion on that at all. I think we were just assuming, I don't know what you guys are assuming. But that's kind of something that's important in an ADU. That's what people look at and think of. And I think you wrote, Ann wrote a very nice reason to have it. I don't remember which one it was, number 2 or number 3. But I'd like to have a little discussion on that, owner occupied, one or the other. We started off with that and it's kind of gone with no discussion. I'd like to hear what the rest of the committee thinks.
I forget, was that an element in your standards discussion? Or we just left that off, I think, right?
I think the first discussion where there was actually something to look at. It was put in there as an option. I believe based on the conversation, it was kind of thought to be not enforceable maybe, or maybe difficult to enforce, or just really against people's private property rights. So I think at some point I added it as a standard in the conditional use for R1.
Special exception.
Yep, and then, yep, same special use, conditional use, same thing. And then when we it seemed like the conversation was saying, hey, look, we don't want to put this as a conditional use. Let's just address this with standards as permitted use. And that's when it was removed.
Yeah, the third one. This is our fourth iteration. Our first one was 2 months ago. I know it seems like a long, long time ago to people. You guys have been working on the housing for quite a while, but it's only been 4 times, and one of them we didn't really get a chance to look at because we got it here. But
Now would be a good time to have that discussion, Mike.
that's what I would like to have.
Yep.
And it seems like we didn't have that discussion. And looking back, it may have seemed like it, but I don't
I think we
recall.
had a discussion, but I'm not sure we reached a formal consensus, but I can see why. I can understand, given our discussion, why it dropped off, but go ahead and share your concern to us about.
I think we should, first of all, I think we should have that. It's enforceable. And if I can find Ann's thing here, she said it way better than I did. No, don't worry. I think
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
well, Mike looks through his extensive notes.
I've got
Find
it.
it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got it. Including a provision requiring owner occupancy, this aligns with the understanding that owner occupancy further reinforces the accessory and subordinate nature of ADUs in relation to the principal use, addressing concerns related to property management and single-family neighborhood character. But the real key here is one of the things that she said, owner occupancy further reinforces the accessory and subordinate nature of ADUs, and owner occupancy is really what people have been asking for. Without consideration for the housing, people said, I want this in every situation here. So that was well put. And I think it's something that's enforceable. You mentioned, I think, I'm sorry, Ann mentioned judicial decision, not in our state, but that was favorable. So those are some reasons that I think it's there. And as far as being enforceable, well, it's just as enforceable as any of our zoning laws because we only enforce things that people complain about. So it's at least that enforceable. So thank you, and for consideration.
When grandma passes away, there would be nothing to permit a neighbor or someone from moving into the already available ADU. I mean, I'm not inherently opposed to the idea of owner occupancy, but I just think as you follow the trail along here, and if the goal is to achieve additional housing, the enforcement of the owner occupancy is really problematic. I don't see, and we've already been told that we can't tell property owners who they can rent to or not, which I think is appropriate. I think the same applies here too, that it is under the homeowner's control. And I don't see our zoning staff having the ability or even the interest or the public interest in following up who moves into the ADUs that have been permitted in the county. It's just not practical. I just can't see it.
I am inclined to agree with Diane. I see it as a pretty significant barrier. If I were to be considering, should I build an ADU, and I see that there's a requirement that I have to stay in that property forever and ever and ever, I would be concerned about that. Things happen, right? You know, maybe you need to relocate to another location and you can't necessarily sell. I'm worried about it.
So doesn't the provision that, we still have the provision, right, that one of the units must be owned by the person who owns the property
Yeah, so it,
or occupied by
if
one?
I'm recalling correctly, I think the last one was, it wasn't that both needed to be, it was just that one needed to be owner occupied, at least, I believe it was 120 days a year, something like that. Chase, do you have it on your computer there?
It's good memory, 120, or you could have a representative. But I didn't quite understand, Monica, as far as you wouldn't have to live there forever and ever. You sell it to somebody and they're the new owner.
Yes, that is true. And what I'm saying is that there are situations where perhaps your mortgage is underwater, right? And you need to move and you can't sell. This is something that has happened to me, so that's why I'm harping on it. You can't always just sell, right? Depending on what the market is doing.
Question,
Chairman.
Mr. Chair?
Oh,
Hit me, Diane.
Yep.
Well, I mean, this is another one of the barriers that we are discussing erecting to make this happen. And, you know, if the intent is to prevent, ADUs, I guess that's helpful, but it just, you know, if our intent is to address what in my view, and I think everyone else's view, is a significant crisis, the fewer barriers that we erect, so long as the standards are robust, and I believe the standards that Ann has proposed are robust, additional barriers are not going to help.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, just for some, clarification, again, does a principal structure owner also has to own a ADU? Unless it's been separated out, he has to own it then, right? If he just one owner for the two structures, correct?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So again, Mike, what is your concern? Mike? Mike.
Mike, you did say that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, I could repeat and read what she said, but Diane keeps talking about barriers. We're making the biggest change to the zoning ordinance since I've been on the board. We're opening up a huge amount and we're trying to make it so that it works for all areas. And Diane is is more concerned, I think, with the housing, and I'm more concerned with the environment. And you can put that groundwater than housing. And this is one thing that keeps it local. So you don't have someone coming in and buying it and renting out both places and either not taking care of it or like happened in the town of Menominee, a wedding was held in one of these things. So you have, if you have the owner, it's just like a duplex. If you have the owner in the duplex, it's a way different situation. So yeah, we're opening things up and Diane's looking at it like we're closing things down. And this is a huge opening. We're really.
So this is not a groundwater concern, but
yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You summarize things well.
Monica, I'm not sure I understood your point about the financial impact on someone.
Okay. So example, so thinking back to the 2008 housing crisis, right? Where, for example, my property, I bought it for $105,000. When it came time for me to move, it was valued at $25,000, which meant that I could not sell that property. I couldn't fork over $25,000 or $75,000 to settle that mortgage. So I had to hold on to it for a year. And so it's a small risk, but these sorts of things happen. So that's why I'm worried about a requirement that a property needs to stay owner occupied, because you can't always just sell depending on what the market is doing.
And does, I guess occupied is a question, right? I mean, if you own the property, and you're trying to sell it, so you couldn't rent your house out while you were trying to sell it, then be the hardship.
Right, yes. Well, in my particular case, it was a condo, and so there was a thing, but, this would be a different barrier that would create the same kind of situation where you can't rent it out.
So it's a balancing. I mean, there are areas where there is heavy development pressure, where the abuse of the ADU criteria, as Mike, has happened, no question about it. And since some increasingly housing is being a commodity that's being financialized by outside investors, that is a concern, especially in areas where amenities like around lakeshore property are a concern. My only concern is that that isn't going to be I don't know. I don't. I'm confused, I guess. Sorry. My feelings.
Mr. Chairman, would explain the confusion, please, because I'm not understanding that.
I don't. Well, I'm worried about other situations where this would be abused to the detriment of the community in which the properties reside. These the communities have. I mean, if we protect the groundwater, that's important consideration, but we also need to protect the character of the community that the housing is in. And one way to do that, I mean, theoretically, one way to do that is to require occupancy by one party, by the owner. But if we have outside parties buying properties for real estate speculation or management, then that could the incentive to do that would be increased if they had the right to build an accessory unit on the property that could bring in additional income. It could make the purchase of that property for income purposes, real estate development purposes, more attractive than it is right now. That's limited if we require occupancy of one of the units. I'm not sure what I think about that. That's where I'm confused.
And I guess I'm not sure that I see that land speculation is a significant issue. I mean, we're trying to get people to build. We're trying to get people to invest in the community, and that's been problematic. So
yeah, so that's a good argument on one side of it.
Yeah.
I can accept that. And the only concern I have is there are some areas where it may be, I don't think most areas is a problem at all. Just there may be a few, and it may be not worth worrying about because it's only a few. So I'll let it go with that. I'm okay with it as it is, I guess. Other questions on this section? If not, let's move on.
So in permitted principal uses for the general agriculture zoning district, we're proposing an attached accessory dwelling unit be permitted as a principal use. And an accessory dwelling unit, ADU, as a permitted accessory use. again, I'm guessing you guys want to talk about this one. I can stop or I can continue. Moving on, so we're getting into the purpose and intent. So right now we have the purpose and intent written as to allow more efficient use of existing housing stock and infrastructure, providing a broader range of housing opportunities that responds to changing family needs and offering a means for residents to remain in their homes and neighborhoods and obtain security, services, and companionship. Applicability, again, no more than one ADU is permitted per lot or parcel. We're getting into the definitions here. I can read these if you like. Would you like me to read them out?
Anybody have any questions on this page? Or do you want to highlight any points, Sam?
Again, we're just kind of coming down to that maximum square feet size, because in the definition for junior accessory dwelling unit, we're saying that it can be detached or attached, and it can't be more than 600 square feet in size.
Just a comment is to make everything clear. To attached and detached, it's just kind of nice to have them both listed so it's understandable. Thanks.
I've added a couple other definitions to what detached building means, what addition means, differentiating between primary dwelling and secondary dwelling, because we do use those terms later, in different parts of the ordinance here in the standards. Zoning permits are required for accessory dwelling units, subject to Chapter 13 and approval by the zoning administrator. Essentially, the approval process is saying that you can't have more than one ADU per lot or parcel, and you need to have a permit that says you're complying with the standards, or at least outlines those standards so that you understand it. Fees and application information for ADUs would be the same as those for a single family dwelling unit for the zoning district that they're in. So this is essentially saying the permit process is going to be very similar to getting a regular house. Same fees, same everything. We're getting into development standards. This first one in letter A is saying that setback reduction, lot coverage, and height regulations will be the same as principal structures. So again, the same as a primary dwelling would be treated. They can be built at the same time or before the single family dwelling. This is just designed to give a little more flexibility for people who maybe want to build a smaller house that's more affordable first while they save up their money to build a larger one or things like that. Just making it clear that you can do that. I can get into that more if we need to. ADUs may not be constructed on the same lot or parcel as a two-family dwelling or a multifamily dwelling. This wasn't in the last version. It was technically in there, but I think adding it as a written standard makes it more clear. Measuring square footage, we're essentially saying that we would measure the square footage from exterior walls. That way staff is never obligated to go into a structure, which we already have a policy not to do that. And that we wouldn't be including like porches, or we would be including in any enclosed spaces like porches or sunrooms. Size limitations, ADU.
Could we stop just for a second?
Yep.
I have a question for clarification. In the past, I brought up that it's possible to put in a two-car garage on the ADU, and it could be the footprint could be even bigger than the original house. And then on, I think, the third revision, there was, I think, something saying that it didn't say footprint, but it was similar to saying 99%. It can't be more than 99% of the size of the. So does this include an attached building, I'm thinking of a garage. A two-car garage could be 500 square feet easily.
So no, we typically don't include garage space in these calculations. Just so you know, in there, it does say all habitable areas. I would not consider a garage habitable, unless there was like a bedroom or something out there, but, that's not included in there. We could make this more clear by saying excluding garages, if you like.
Yeah, that's what I think you did in the past. So in the end, the structure built could be larger than the original house if you had a large garage. 1,200 square feet plus the garage, another 1,000 square feet or 800 square feet. You know, maybe somebody's making a work shed out in their garage too. Is
Yeah,
that something we want? Or does it matter?
I guess I would look at it, does it matter? I mean, they would not be, prohibited from building a detached two-car garage in any capacity. I don't know why it would be any different if it was attached.
So someone could have, I'm just thinking what you said, someone could have a house, put a detached ADU, and then put a totally separate two-car garage.
Right,
Yeah, so what's the difference of putting it onto the ADU?
yeah.
I hear you. I'm done with that one. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? Uh, Continue.
So, size limitations must be subordinate, so essentially it has to be smaller than whatever the size of the single-family dwelling is. And then in no case can it ever be more than 1,200 square feet. This is a number I just put on there because I had heard 1,000, we had 1,500. Again, open to the committee. The distance requirement, so we're saying that it needs to be within 300 linear feet, so that edge of the ADU needs to touch 300 feet of the primary dwelling. Wastewater disposal complies with sewage system requirements unless exempted by Chapter 6 sanitation. I do have another provision in here saying that at any time, the zoning administrator may require the applicant to demonstrate the adequacy of the system, and anticipated number of bedrooms. So again, it's just reassuring that we have an avenue to look into these further if we need to. Lot area, for lots that are less than 1 acre, the applicant may be required to demonstrate to the satisfaction of the Environmental Services Department that the lot has sufficient area for accommodating the proposed ADU, while maintaining compliance with setback regulations and facilitating the installation or modification of the entire wastewater treatment system, including provisions for potential replacement. The Environmental Services Department reserves the authority to request a comprehensive report inclusive of soil borings and percolation tests as stipulated by Wisconsin Administrative Code as part of the application review process. So we did kind of cover this up in the review or in the reference chart, but this is a lot more detailed than the simple language. But this is saying if this lot is less than 1 acre, the zoning administrator can say, I need to see a soil boring that proves you can put this system in here before we're going to issue a permit. Again, this is trying to make sure that these septic systems are adequate and they're not going to cause a problem in the future. Building code compliance, again, this is already given, but it's just to make it more clear for applicants that they need to comply with building safety codes and safety regulations. They'll need to be permitted just like any other house would be. Restrictions on the separate sale of the ADU, so you can't sell the ADU separately unless you get the property legally subdivided, and you'll have to meet the requirements of the Chapter 16 Land Division Ordinance. You'll also need to have a deed restriction recorded that says that essentially it cannot be subject to these things. It can't be converted to a condo. This is just there so that, you know, it's on record, so any future property owner is aware that this is an ADU and these are the rules that apply, and it can never be separated. That is it.
Question, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
On a detached junior ADU, is there any minimum size in any place in zoning that how small can it be and still be considered like a habitable building?
So within the zoning restrictions, we do not have a minimum size because that is regulated under Uniform Dwelling Code.
Okay.
So essentially what we're saying is that if you can meet all the requirements for a habitable structure, regardless of minimum size, we're not requiring that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So without objection from the committee, I'd like to ask if there are citizens here who, after having heard this discussion, would like to make some short comments for us to include in our consideration. Anyone want to follow up? I'll start with you. Okay, and then you. First, you please come up to the microphone. Name and address. And fairly brief if you can.
All right, I'll try and keep it succinct. I'm Anastasia Sigorsky, 630 Broadway Street. So I guess I'll just have three quick things. The first one is it's sounding like the justification for the 1 acre requirement is being grounded in concerns for groundwater. And I would just recommend separating those two issues so that they get their proper attention. Because I think that if we're in agreement that there is a housing crisis, then I think we're in agreement about the fact that we need more houses. And if we need more houses, we need more septic tanks. So I don't think we can say that just because we can have more septic tanks doesn't mean we should when we're in a housing crisis, because to accept that means we need more septic tanks. So I think it can't necessarily be a thing of we don't need more septic tanks. The issue is we need more septic tanks and we need better septic tanks. If there are concerns for the current standard of septic tanks operating in Dunn County. So I guess I'm proposing that maybe there's additional agenda items where we begin conversations about an additional ordinance or something that addresses the current inadequacies of the regulation with the current septic tanks that I heard are like leaking or, you know what I'm saying? I think we need to separate the two topics so that they get their due attention. And then the next thing is I want to advocate strongly against pushing down the square footage to 1,000 for the detached additional dwelling unit. And I think the only really thing I'll say with this is for context, 1,000 square feet is the size of half a tennis court. So I don't think any of us would want to live in half a tennis court if for some reason we as individuals didn't have the privilege to determine where we were going to end up in the end of our days. Because my understanding now is a lot of us are individuals that will probably be able to determine where we're going to spend the last few years of our lives. We're also currently in conversation about people that will not have that privilege. And I don't think it's very fair for us to say that half a tennis court is what we're willing to allot. And my last point is, I don't know if there's still a clause in the ordinance in regards to having the additional dwelling unit match the style of the main house. It's not? Okay, perfect. Then I won't even talk more about that. I was going to say, let's not do that. Okay, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, back there, yeah.
My name is Eli Brewer, 630 Broadway. I'd like to maybe ask about the PFAS or PFAS or PFOAs, and if you could like name that specific company. I think it's pretty important to talk about it, like especially given like the recent history. I assume it's the aqueous firefighting foam contamination you were referring to. Right, and like there's been a lot of recent history, and like of spills of aqueous firefighting foam and the environmental damage it has caused. So I would like probably like I don't know the contamination level, but I think like maybe like a public notice or like notifying the public of that spill may be in order, or like to the level of contamination, because I don't know if you guys have seen black waters, but like that stuff will kill your livestock. Like you see these stories of like hundreds of cows dying from PFAS contamination. So yeah, I think that's probably something to follow up on, and like really appreciate the name of that company that is doing it. So say that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that'd be appropriate. And other comments on ADUs in particular?
Again, Diego Marin, 630 Broadway. So I wanted to talk about the tennis court things a little. I just Googled it quick. It's actually 2,800 square feet in a tennis court. 1 acre is 16 tennis courts. An acre is a ridiculous amount of land to limit having 2 buildings on. I think that's silly. Following up on the next comments. So I have a lot of concerns with people, not people, but essentially companies, and coming from other places, large investment firms and real estate firms, and essentially inflating the value of the housing market by holding on to properties, understanding that they have an indefinite return as long as overarchingly people don't sell. So I would like to propose that we put in some sort of protections around subdividing the ADUs by making them an ADU and then separating the parcels. I think there should be at least a minimum amount of time that that parcel remains intact as one segment to prevent people from using this as a loophole to create more rental and landlord opportunities. The other thing is that I understand the intention around having the owner occupancy, and I really want to respect that. I think it should be limited. There should not be an occupancy requirement. There should definitely be a minimum, like a maximum amount of tenancy, essentially. There should not be 2 buildings that you can rent out, only the one. And the other ADU should be left to be utilized freely. But I think that kind of requirement would prohibit this from just being another situation where people can buy a property, build 2 rental units on it, slough it off to a rental agency so that the landlords never have to be accountable for the conditions of the living that people will have to be in. And then the lady earlier today who mentioned the 300 feet being a restriction for them, I think that should be taken into consideration. I think that friction of distance being reduced to the minimum in regards to having our physical infrastructure needs met should be considered, and maybe that should be lifted in light of that. And also, it sounds like there will never be a permit issued for a design that cannot support septic properly. It sounds like this is not a passing of a way for people to circumvent our current sanitation standards. That sounds like this is not written in here at all. And I would really suggest to maybe move along from that topic until a more appropriate time.
Yeah, sure.
The sale restrictions item, I don't know if you have this packet, item I, the ADU can't be sold separately from the main house, et cetera, et cetera. Is that not sufficient for you?
I guess essentially it's not sufficient if it is available for people to divide the property, right?
It has to be legally subdivided.
And essentially that would, there is a legal process to do that.
Correct.
Yeah, so it is not enough for me.
Okay. All right. Wanted to understand. Thank you.
Yep, I would like there to just be some protection there. And one more thing, I really do think I'm looking forward to seeing how you all rewrite and essentially expand on a new process to make ordinances and legislations more accessible. They are bad to read. They and and I think that that would make participation so easy, so fluid, so organic that we will see these halls filled if people can actively understand what you're telling them is happening. That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Cook. you go.
Thank you. My name is Bob Cook. I reside at E6477 490th Avenue, Menominee. I'm a lifelong resident, and I'm also chairman of the town of Red Cedar. And I am happy to see that we're dealing with this ADUs, and I think they're something that we grew up with in a farm rural community. And I don't think they're the answer to the housing crisis. ADUs have been around for a long time in rural America. I like to see that we're limiting the size of the ADU. I live in an 1,100 square foot house. I raised 2 kids in there, centrally located between the 2 farms. And now I have more house than what I need. I'm not going to sell my house to go to a smaller unit. It's paid for. I'll stay right there. But I don't see a problem with limiting the size. In all the cases that I had seen in the rural area where I live, the secondary house was always smaller, and it seemed to work out just fine. And as far as the housing crisis and affordable housing, I think we made a big step forward yesterday with the election. We would have raised the cost $82 per 100,000 of a valued property, and it wasn't needed. We had sent out the facts on flyers why we believed that it wasn't necessary. Well, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Anyone else? Our county manager would like to speak. Please.
All right, yeah. I'm Chris Corpola, the county manager, and if these.
Name and address.
Oh,
Chris.
525 Oak Park Circle.
Thank you very much.
Here in Menominee. If these ceiling tiles are 2 by 2, which I think that they are, then 1,000 square feet is the width of this room and from here to Gary. Just as a frame of reference. Because sometimes I have to think, well, how much is 1,000 feet? But that would be like the footprint that you're all sitting in.
Pretty big. Okay. Any other comments? So we have this scheduled for a public hearing in 2 weeks, Ann, is that right? Or not?
We actually have to have time to go through this with Corporation Counsel
Okay.
before we can finalize that. So I think that we could very safely have the public hearing on, if you want to have it for PRD. So it'd be, or during a PRD meeting, it would be March 20th.
Okay. So
If that's okay with everyone.
okay. That sounds good. Let's do that. Any other comments? Or I think, any other comments? Okay.
What's our next step with this right here now?
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. So do you feel, and I know you were taking notes, and Tracy was taking notes, I think, too. So we can still bring it back to this committee for discussion next week, in 2 weeks. It will require some final adjustments by council, but that's no problem. So let's do that. Let's bring it back. And a lot of good issues are raised today. concerns about the septic. I think I just have to say that I think it's, the question about what is appropriate septic regulations is a really complicated topic and not one about which there is a lot of agreement and about which we have only limited control with regard to the state statutes and stuff. So, but those are important considerations and we should do what we can. So with that, I'll close this part of the agenda. If anyone else is, oh, Mike, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I don't know, but if we come back, we're going to be in exactly the same spot if we don't give Ann some
Why don't you
direction.
point out what things you think you would like to address in
Well,
changes?
I think we can give her direction as a committee right now on the 1,200 square feet, for example. Do we want to go with that or not? Do we want to go with 1,000? And there's three things that I'm looking at. The square footage, the most important thing is the 1 acre minimum. And the other one is owner occupancy. So owner occupancy, 1 acre minimum and square footage. And as a committee, we can give her directions on that right now, because next time will be the last time we get a chance to really look at it and say, here. I don't know. What do you think, Diane? You want to just kind of try to take care of them right now?
Well, either that or we listen to public commentary in public hearing. I mean, I can tell you what my position is on them. I'm willing to give a little bit on the size. Owner occupancy, I think, is an undue barrier, as is the 1 acre minimum. I'm not supportive.
But yeah, we're eventually going to have to decide.
So let's, those are three of the questions that have caused concern. So at the last meeting, I asked if there was consensus about 1,000. We said there was. Now we've come back to 1,200. Is there consensus around 1,200? Anyone object to that? Okay, Mike.
No, it'd be a compromise on my part. But
Yep. With regard to so the other one, owner occupancy. What was your other concern? Well, that is the question, I guess. Owner occupancy. Yeah. What is right now? That's not required. And is there anyone who feels like we need to require that? Is there anyone else who feels that way? Okay. So what was the third one? Oh, the 1 acre minimum. Clarify your position on that, Mike, so you know what we're talking about.
yeah, I think she just summarizes groundwater. The state's rules allow more than should be allowed. And that's a summary of it. As Ms. Stahl said, in more dense areas. So that's my concern, is groundwater. 1 acre is just such an easy thing to do because we're doing it now. Why would we continue to require 1 acre minimums for the new parcels when this would be saying we don't? Groundwater versus over and above housing. Groundwater is permanent. Housing in what was it, in 25 years, we'll have too many houses. Or I can't remember the exact number of years. So groundwater, she summarized it for me.
Any other comments on that, Diane?
Well, I think to suggest that an ADU would be permitted with insufficient density to permit an adequate wastewater treatment system. I mean, I just don't see that that's going to happen. So I think what Ann and her staff have crafted in the standards, which would allow with discretion of the zoning office permitting of less than 1 acre, I think is entirely sufficient.
Anyone else? Carrie?
I'm just going to say that I would probably compromise that. I agree with like Diane, for more housing, that the owner occupancy is not required. But I agree with Mike 100% that the 1 acre should be the very new minimum. So Hope you're both happy.
Yeah, he did give us, Jerry, really.
Monica, do you have any thoughts on it?
I appreciated the comments from Anastasia about the need to separate the housing issue from the groundwater issue. I think that that just makes sense. I wouldn't want to put a minimum lot size on it for the purposes of dealing with the groundwater problem.
Well, and I am concerned about the septic issue also, but I do, and I don't think separating them is really the right way to do it because we have so little control over the septic regulations. I wish we could do that. But I don't think it's going to, given the fact that we have the protections in place that we have, it won't make things, I think it's a manageable risk at this point in time. And so I'm willing to agree to the current language in the, so that's sort of like an informal vote of 3-2 for leaving it in for now. We can always open ourselves up to further discussion on that, but that's, are there other areas, Anne, that you want guidance on that you don't have?
I think those were the big three. There is nothing else I can think of that I would really need before getting this solidified. I guess I would like to know, do you want anything brought to you next week from me? Or can I just focus on getting this to prime time for the public hearing?
Here's what I would say, focus on prime time, but let's put it on the agenda just for general discussion, given the material and the discussion we've had today. So if other ideas have come up, we can leave ourselves. I hate to drag this around too long behind the car, but as Mike said, it's an important resolution. So we'll put it on the agenda for discussion, but you don't need to prepare anything special for that. Go ahead and do the prep for the public hearing. Okay, let's move on. Now, the longest item of all, the 8A. After we made Chase sit through all the resolution authorizing participation in the Snowmobile Recreation Trails Grant Program.
Yes, thank you. So this is a reoccurring resolution we do every year to continue participation in the Snowmobile Trail Aid Program. It also provides grant funds for not only trail maintenance and keeping trails accessible, but also bridge projects as well. So this is just a reoccurring one that only needs PR&D committee approval. Back in 2010, the county board granted authority to this committee to approve this resolution. So this is a reoccurring thing and it's part of our grant application every year.
Any questions? Motion to approve? Supervisor Morehouse, second. Professor Burke. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's approved. Any announcements? Can I think Andrew had Marcel, our county clerk, had offered to register people for the conference if they haven't already. So Chase's reminder for that is good, and it's part of our duty as a supervisor to think about going. Next meeting date is March 6th. Thanks everybody for good discussion. Thanks to the public for coming. We are adjourned.